Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today. The webinar will be 35 minutes along with time at the end for Q&A. During the webinar, you can send questions through the chat icon, which is located at the bottom of your screen. We will be answering your questions during the Q&A portion at the end of the webinar. We will be issuing PDH certificates for those attending the live session that have elected to receive them. A copy of the presentation will also be included in our post-webinar follow-up. All of our webinars are available on demand at bartlettwest.com. We continue to add webinars in the near future, and we encourage you to check back often. Today we will hear from Darren Ammon and Angela Sharp. Angela is a civil engineer and serves as a senior engineering specialist at Bartlett and West. She has 25 years of experience leading clients through most all aspects of their residential, commercial, and industrial land development projects. Angela regularly assists clients with site selection, platting, zoning, sanitary sewer, water, and street infrastructure design, site civil design, and project permitting. Darren is a senior project manager and landscape architect at Bartlett and West with 22 years of development experience. Darren has been involved with various commercial, industrial, and residential site plan developments, land use master plans, university or community college projects, along with numerous parks and trail designs. He frequently works with clients early in the development process on site investigations, concepting, and understanding clients' needs to maximize the value of their land, building, or site assets. Today, Angela and Darren will be discussing unearthing information, creating value through site due diligence. With that, I will turn it over to our presenters to take it away.
Thanks, Rebecca. Good morning. My name is Darren Ammon, and I'm really excited to talk with you about something myself and our team spends a lot of time and effort doing for clients, and that is site due diligence. We have a variety of folks that have signed up to learn a little bit more about what we do with investigations of site due diligence. So going to start off and talk just a little bit about kind of a couple of the basics. If you look up in the dictionary or lots of different locations on the internet, for example, what is just regular due diligence? I mean, it's the investigation, audit, or review of that's performed to confirm facts of a matter under consideration, or otherwise sometimes in the financial world, due diligence can be termed as the requirement of an examination of financial records before entering into a proposed transaction with another party. Now that's general due diligence, but what we're going to focus on today is what we term site due diligence. And at Bartlett and West, we describe that and define that as listed on the screen there, which is the investigation, research, and analysis of a specific property to really assess the suitability of that project and property development and uncovering any risks or challenges that may be involved with it looking ahead. One of the things we'd like to do right now at the moment actually is take a quick poll to understand some of the experience that each of you have had with dealing with site due diligence. So if you might take a moment to answer the polling question that's going to pop up, we can see what type of experience the crowd has had in dealing with site due diligence. Give you 10 or 15 seconds here to answer the question and we'll see the results. Thanks for doing that. Looks like based on some of the results we're seeing, it's kind of all over the board. We've got some that have no experience, some that are in the middle, use it a little bit, and others that use it daily. So really kind of all over the board. So hopefully some of these items we're going to talk about moving ahead with site due diligence, you'll find some value in how we approach this when looking at various projects. So some of the considerations to really think about initially when looking at different projects and different sites, think about where does your project sit? Where does it lie? For example, Is it in California, where you're going to have to think about seismic considerations and different types of things associated with that if you're putting a building on a project? Or if you're in Florida, where there's extreme wind load for reoccurring hurricanes or sandy soils, different types of things of that would affect your project. Or for example, if your project is located in Minnesota or Colorado, you're going to need to know snow loads and different things. So really understanding where your project is sitting is an important factor when looking at some site due diligence on specific properties. Also, what type of development are you doing? Not everything fits into one bucket. It's very different if you're looking at doing an industrial park that might have multiple parcels of land, different landowners, lots of acreage, versus a half acre, or 5 acre site where you may be wanting to put a restaurant or hotel. So it's very different. So understand the type of development you're wanting to pursue. And also, it again is going to be different whether you're a smaller private entity or a larger corporation. For example, thinking about, again, if it's 1 or 2 acres and you are restaurants and hotels, where a smaller acreage in that parcel is something that's going to be more important to you, you're going to be very specific and wanting to understand how that fits on that corner or where's access, versus larger entities such as DOTs or railroads, for example, who might have multiple acres of land and assets that stretch miles or across different states and counties. So really understanding those parameters and asking those questions to understand these initial items will help provide guidance for what due diligence best meets your need and will provide you the most value looking ahead. So when you start talking about site due diligence, a lot of different items come to mind. And for those of you that work with this frequently, I don't think this will be any surprise, but for those of you that do not, let me explain this just a little bit further. Site due diligence is not just looking at one element or a few elements, it's looking at a variety of different things and all of those that could impact your project and what the steps would be moving forward. For example, things like, what are the soil conditions on the property? Is there rock? Is there floodplain? Where are the closest utilities that you're going to need to connect to provide service to your building? What's the topography on the site? And all kinds of different things that would impact a property. There's a variety of different things that need to be looked at so that you can really understand what's going on. So thinking about this in simplistic terms, what does some of this really mean when you start talking about doing site due diligence? It means doing your homework, thinking about these things early and understanding some of the challenges that may be forthcoming when looking ahead. Now I'd like to introduce Angela, who's going to talk a little bit more about some of our specific types of due diligence. Angela?
Thanks, Darren. At Bartlett & West, generally, we look at due diligence in 2 ways. One would be a desktop due diligence study, and Darren's going to talk about the elements associated with that here in a few minutes. I'm going to talk about some of the more in-depth elements that would be included in a complete due diligence report. And the main difference is the desktop is generally things that, as it describes, you can get at your desktop, whereas a complete due diligence would include physical site investigations. It's a much deeper dive into the property and site than the desktop would be. So one of the first things that we would look at with that, and dependent upon project constraints, financing, all different items, the survey can be done in a number of different ways. You could just have a boundary survey. You could do a topographic survey to understand the utilities and terrain, or for most financing, an ALTA survey is required. An ALTA survey has a full list of options that can be included and certified by the surveyor as to the encumbrances and constraints on the property. There can be things like zoning, like utilities, the setbacks, a whole variety of items that would be important for the financier of the project to understand, to see what kinds of things would be involved in encumbering the property. associated with that, we would work with one of our preferred partners and obtain the title work for the property. We would have to have the deeds researched and all easements and legal documents included, and those would be referenced on the ALTA survey and certified by our surveyor. In addition to surveying the property, we also would do the utility locates as a part of that. And oftentimes, not only locating the utilities that are marked by the one call or even the private entities, we can also have excavation to determine utility sizes, depths, because oftentimes they'll have to be relocated to facilitate whatever the development is on the site. We would also work with a partner to get geotechnical work done. Oftentimes we would have borings and soils reports that would show us what that subsurface strata looks like, tell us where you might encounter rock, where the water table might be, and also give us recommendations for pavement and building slab foundations and that kind of information, which is really, really critical to a project. In addition to that, we would also partner with a firm to help us with environmental concerns and investigations. Oftentimes, we would do what's called a phase 1 investigation, where it is research the historical use of the property, whether there have been any environmental issues with the property. It also would look at wetlands and whether there are any located on the site. And moving forward, it's getting more and more important to understand what the wetlands impacts could be. And sometimes they would have to be remediated. And so having a wetlands delineation done by a consultant would be very important to understanding the developable area of the site and how much of the area could be impacted and whether it could be remediated. So those are all a number of the things that we would include on the complete due diligence survey.
Yeah, so as Angela mentioned, you have the complete due diligence, which is really in-depth and provides a lot of information. But some items that we have found that provide a lot of value to a variety of clients that we work with is what we term desktop due diligence. And the name itself might kind of describe what we're talking about here, but I'd like to tell you a little bit more about that and some of the things that we looked at. And we'll look at with these particular investigations. So you think about things from land development codes. So each project and property is very unique, as you might imagine. In understanding the jurisdiction and municipality that you're working with, we take a look at what are those codes that may impact the project's development opportunities, and how will that in terms affect time and cost and all of these different type of factors on the project. So it's very important to understand, again, the municipality restrictions on the project. Infrastructure identification, instead of doing things like if your budget can't handle a full topographic survey or actually going out and excavating and unearthing utilities to find exact depths, we have a ton of resources at Bartlett and West that we use and have at our fingertips to get maps and lots of information to understand what resources for utilities are available, such as where's the nearest water line, where's the nearest sanitary sewer main that we're going to need to connect to, electric and gas or other things like that. In addition to that, we also have information thinking about things that are much larger impacts. For example, if you have a large Southern Star or other gas pipeline or oil pipeline that potentially would cross a property when you're doing investigation for industrial parks, for example, because they're going to have large setbacks. So using this data is really important to digging up some of your homework and thinking about those things. GIS mapping data falls right into that category. That's some of the maps that we use, but it's very helpful when you pull up GIS data so you can uncover things quickly and still get a relative snapshot of what is on a piece of property, such as the topography, who are the nearest and how many surrounding property owners will be impacted by the project, what's the nearest point of access and ingress and egress for the property. If you're dealing with, again, larger parcels like an industrial park, how close is the nearest rail line that potentially could be used to serve the property? Do we have large bridges or other items that would need to be crossed by trucks, for example, if the area was developed into an industrial park, and other things that are easily and readily available, floodplain maps with FEMA and different things like that. So using these online resources to be able to provide this valuable information to our clients is important. We start talking about project suitability. What desktop due diligence really does in kind of simple layman's terms is, I would say, it's kind of we use it as a thumbs up or a thumbs down. So if you want us to take a look at a piece of property and look at all these factors we've just talked about, we can come back to you quickly without having to spend days and countless hours and getting on site. Yes, it looks like this particular project you may be investigating feels like it will work on the project, or, well, you might want to consider these factors because it looks like you may have some challenges moving ahead. So it's, again, I call it a thumbs up or a thumbs down, kind of trying to really understand the best way to move forward so you can make the best decision for yourself, your client, or your business when looking at a piece of property. And costs and timeline, obviously that's important. So uncovering with desktop due diligence, you can uncover is what's the permits costs? Do you happen to have impact or tap fees that are going to be required if you do build on the project? Plus also going back to the municipality that you're working in, really understanding a firm timeline of submittal, approval processes, and permitting moving forward so you can plan appropriately to get your project from start to finish and what that time frame would look like. And as I mentioned, this is a really popular avenue that clients work with us on, is using desktop due diligence to help us investigate some of these prospects. And we're going to have another quick poll question right now where we'd like to hear from all of you again to understand in your particular experience or job sector, what's a turnaround time that you might need to help satisfy some of those client items if doing something like due diligence. See what the results are here. We've given them about 10 or 15 seconds. Thanks for that. And it looks like, as you can see, some of the results, it's, again, widely varied. Some need an immediate turnaround in a couple days because there's decisions that probably need to be made on make a decision where they want to move forward with land, and others, you got a little bit more time to understand and think about and get back to potentially clients or investors. So looks like it really is kind of varied in terms of your particular area or sector. As we move ahead here, I want to talk, well, why is all this important? This is, good information and it's some background and starting to understand, but again, what makes this important? Got a couple of brief stories that I'd like to share why this is important, and doing your homework can avoid some potential pitfalls. Excuse me. We had a client at Bartlett and West that we've worked with for a long time, and we've done a variety of projects for them. And they said they would, they'd contact us in the future anytime they have any upcoming projects, and we knew they had one on the horizon. It was various months down the road, and I got a call myself from this client, and they said, "Hey, we found a piece of land for our next development. We've already closed on the property. It was just perfect. We loved it. It's very rolling terrain. It's got a nice creek in the background and some of the trees, just what I envisioned for our project." And it's like, "Oh, that's awesome. Great. Can you send us a little bit more information? We'll be glad to take a look at it and kind of start doing our homework on it and help you with the next steps." Well, come to find out, the particular project, immediately when they told me the address, it kind of in my mind, I was like, this property I think has some history to it. Well, come to find out, that particular property used to be an old landfill. And you wouldn't know it today because it did look green and lush on top, but below the surface was lots of challenges. And the client had no idea. It wasn't divulged to them, and they had already closed on the property. It was theirs, and they were going to be moving forward regardless. So Some of the things they had to do was we helped them understand some of the excavation and mitigation costs that they were going to need to do with some of the trash areas or avoid them. But one of the other bigger factors that incurred a lot of cost for them was the over 60 or more geopiers that had to be done on the building itself to stabilize the actual structure far down into the surface of the soil because of the old landfill and the potential moving. So thinking about that type of thing, again, doing your homework and understanding that early, that piece of property may have not been the best fit for them after all, but they were already stuck with it. Another example was we had a client that was in the restaurant business, and to them, image, branding, and visualization of their restaurant immediately is very important to them. And when thinking about that, being on a prominent corner, again, was extremely important. They had found a piece of property and they said, hey, take a look at this for us, would you? This looks like it's going to be a great choice, but we just want to have you make sure. So we did our desktop due diligence on that for them. And one of the items that we uncovered there and found really through local codes was from the center of the intersection, there was a 100-foot radius around that intersection for every corner that was required to put so much paving, lots of beautifying landscaping and green space requirements, and it made the setback push them back from the corner, get 100 feet from the center of the intersection. Ultimately, when we looked at that and their footprint, they could barely even fit enough parking in their building for what they wanted on the property. It could have made it happen, but it pushed them away from the corner and had this other landscaping and other elements that cost additional money. They were not aware of it, and they ultimately decided that corner wasn't a good fit for them, and they decided to look elsewhere. Again, uncovering some of these things early, they were fortunate enough they hadn't closed on the property and were still in their due diligence states from a real estate standpoint, and we were able to help them uncover this and move on.
Thanks, Darren. At Bartlett & West, we're an employee-owned company, and a number of years ago, as owners, we all determined that the purpose for our company is to lead our communities to a better tomorrow. One of the ways that mine and Darren's team does this is by working with our economic development partners in site selection, especially, but then in full ranges of services. I have a couple of stories to talk about on projects that we've done recently over the past few years for industrial commerce parks. One of them is Proximity Park in Ottawa, which is in Franklin County, Kansas, and the other is Consifier, which is here in Topeka in Shawnee County, Kansas. On both of those, we provided those economic development partners with a full range of services, but it started off with them asking us to help them with a site selection study to determine where in the community was the best spot for the next industrial commerce park so that they could draw those prospects in to invest their capital dollars in the community. So we got busy on studies for the site selection, and those included things such as transportation. How close is the nearest airport? How close is the nearest rail? Highway access, how close is that? And what are the constraints and limitations to that? How close are adjacent residential properties and how many are there? Because being neighbors to industrial commerce parks is not usually the best thing for residential properties. And a lot of prospects, that's one of the boxes they will check off in their site selection list. Checking out utility infrastructure, seeing what the capacities are, how far those utilities would need to be extended to each of the areas that we were considering for their site selection. And then just looking at the full range that we've already talked about in the site due diligence to find out which site within each of those communities was the best one for that next industrial commerce park to increase that economic development and the tax base in the community. So we helped them with the site selection, and then after that, we also helped with platting, zoning, annexation, also helped with infrastructure design to extend those utilities to the sites. And we've subsequently also designed some of the site civil elements in Consifier. Mars Chocolate North America built their first plant that they had built in the United States in 35 years, and we were able to help them with that. And they've since done an expansion. And now there is another site underway, under construction on the balance of the Konza Fire property. So it's very exciting that we were able to lead our communities to those great developments in each of those areas. In addition to that, we can even add other values with site due diligence. And some of those additional services that we can provide, funding is always a concern on every development, and figuring out how you're going to make that funding mechanism work for you. And we can help with grant and financing options depending upon the different type of project you might have. In the past, we've assisted with historic tax credits. We've worked on a number of projects where we've converted old school buildings to new elder housing apartment complexes, which are even in more demand moving forward. We've also worked on community development block grants on water and sewer projects specifically, build grants, which are better utilizing investments to leverage development. Specifically, we've worked with those with some of our rail clients and helped them to be successful. Also, TIF districts, tax increment financing. A number of those we've worked with mixed use developments that are commercial, office, residential, and generally those are in deteriorating areas of the community. So that's really a boon to the community to not only help with the development, to help improve some of those areas that had been deteriorating in the past. We've also helped with recreational trails programs, grants in recreational areas and parks. So there's a number of different funding opportunities that we can help assist and lead our clients through. Also, another element would be GIS database. Darren talked about the municipal GIS sites that we would research with the desktop due diligence, but also we have a whole team here at Bartlett and West of employee owners that have expertise in creating and designing GIS databases for specific sites. So for instance, they have done that for railroads, where they catalog all of the different ownerships of the railroad and easements and encumbrances and utility crossings and all different kinds of information that would be really key to being able to manage that property. It can also work for commercial or industrial sites where you're looking for prospects to come to the site. Create a database where they can research and see what opportunities might be available on each site. Another item where we can add value is with our design build employee owners. We have folks that can assist us with orders of magnitude on cost estimating at the front end of projects and as we move through design. They can do constructability reviews and also project timeline reviews to check for schedule breaking issues that they might identify that we wouldn't necessarily have thought of without that build experience that they have in their background. So those are some of the options that I'd like to talk about. And then graphics are always helpful in conveying the essence of a project. A lot of people have a hard time looking at line drawings, but if you show them something graphic, pictorial, they love that. And Darren's team of landscape architects are really talented at capturing this.
Yeah, one of the things that we like to, again, offer to add value, and whether it is with a complete due diligence or a desktop due diligence version, is thinking about site concepting and 3D animation graphics. I'd like to share a little bit more with you on some of that, with some of the preliminary concepts, just so you kind of have an idea in mind of what we're talking about, because there's a variety of different levels of concepting and effort that can be put forth when helping you to create value on a particular project. I'm going to flip through some of these. So if you'll see on the screen, they'll be up there for 10 or 15 seconds, and we'll kind of keep moving on so you can see the different examples. What you're seeing on these first few slides is what we term as bubble diagramming. It really is a very high level concepting. This was some ideas for a particular industrial park project where they just wanted to know, here's the parameters, here's the boundary of our site. What do you think we could come up with for some potential access points, different acreages, different sizes. How might that lay out and what might that look like if we put together some ideas? Didn't spend a lot of time on it, but just enough thinking about all these factors that we would have uncovered through doing some of the due diligence and really thinking about how could these ideas actually lay out into a particular plan if they decided to move forward. So offering simple solutions, again, as bubble diagramming is one option. If you want to take that to a little bit higher level, that would take a little bit more time, but also provide a lot of value in thinking about things, is site concepting. Here you can see this is a little bit more refined, but starts thinking about lots of different uses that could be used on a property. This client had multiple acres and really wanted to know, I'm wide open. What can happen on this property? I'd love to hear some of your ideas as experts in planning and engineering and development and how that would fit on the property. Anything from industrial to mixed use to commercial, or even what's shown on the screen there. Could the whole property be developed into mostly a single family residential subdivision? They were mostly interested in trying to move the property and sell it, so they wanted to have some ideas to be able to share with investors and others. And this is one way that we can do that and put that together, and thinking like how would the floodplain, it could be used as green space in scenarios like this. How could this be tied in? Finally, I'd like to really talk about maybe a very specific example on a particular site and how that might layer together when you start thinking about different program elements. In this particular example, we knew the piece of property that someone was interested in, and we had some very high-level programming elements. We're going to build a building of XYZ size in phase 1, but we're going to need this much area to expand. We're going to need this much truck parking. We're going to need to have docks. This is how many employees we're going to have. And there was some general program elements. So we put together a concept that took all of those things into mind, thinking about slopes and utilities, but also had a plan view graphic of what that may look like to help them visualize some of that. And then beyond just plan view, sometimes folks struggle with really understanding, that's great and all with the colors and plan view if I was flying over it at 40,000 feet in an airplane, but what's that going to look like when we're close up to it and standing on the ground? 3D visualization. So we popped that up, gave them a real world idea. We didn't have an exact building design. We didn't have architects and everything spending a lot of time designing that, but coming up with a general idea based on parameters to show them what a day and a night view, for example, may look like on this particular site. And then even a third element to that is bringing the project to life. It just helps every decision maker you're working with as a human being. And facts alone don't necessarily convince humans to make decisions. Emotions play a part in that. And really, if you can do something like this and take a image, and I apologize, it'll depend on your bandwidth. This may look a little bit choppy coming over the internet, but if you see it in person and sent as a file, it would run very smooth. But it really gets folks excited about, wow, that's what my project could look like moving forward. So it really gets them excited about taking those next steps. We're going to have one final poll as we move to conclude our webinar here in a few minutes, just to see from all of you, for some of the things we've just talked about, what would provide the most value to you or some of your clients on a particular project if you were doing site due diligence as an add-on. Let's see what we've got for the results after everybody's had a chance to click in. Again, looks like a diverse set of answers. Looks like site layout concepts kind of comes back as the most popular with 3D images and animation. So good to know. Well, thank you for that. It looks like it's a very diverse group of information. And as we've said, every project is unique and property is unique in and of itself when you're looking at these things. But a few things to take away when you're really thinking about your project and the site and land that you're going to be working on. Really think about, again, are you doing an industrial park, or are you doing a restaurant, a hotel, or something totally different, an office? Think about what those key decision-making factors are going to need to be and what you're going to understand to make the best decisions for your property and clients moving forward. Again, is it really about creating that gateway entrance and having a wonderful vision for your clients at the front door? Or is it more important that we have tremendous access and quick and easy access to an interstate? Is it the size of the lots, for example, if you're dealing with multiple portions of ground and parcels to develop an industrial park or something other? And how flexible do you need to be? So really think about all these things, and decision-making factors are all over the board depending on your specific project. But please keep that in mind when thinking about that and making a decision, along with the due diligence that is understood. So some key takeaways as we wrap this up a little bit that I'd just like to reiterate from us at Bartlett and West and those of us that deal with this on a routine basis. Again, think about the level of site due diligence you need. Is it a complete? Is it something less, more of a due diligence? And how that timeline is impacted so that information can be provided and get to you quickly and reliably. Do you have the resources and information available to find the answers to the questions that you need? Whether it's Bartlett and West or someone else, please ask those questions so that you understand that you're getting reliable information that can be used on your project. Might sound simple, but how long will it take, and how much will it cost? Different types of factors in what they're doing. And what will you have for a deliverable? Very important question to understand. Are you going to just get an email back with some bullet points, or is it going to be put in a formal hardcover document with all of the maps and different data put together? That all varies into what you want to get and the client standpoint from that. Are there additional options of value that we discussed? Are they available for you to consider? And if you're asking someone to do site due diligence, have they done this type of investigation before? Make sure you're talking to a reliable source that deals with finding out answers to site due diligence on a regular basis. So with that, from Angela and myself, we'd very much like to thank you for listening to our webinar. And if you have any further questions or items or projects or anything that we can help you with, we'd love to be able to learn more. So now we'll take a look and see if there's been any questions, and we'll be happy to answer those. So thank you very much for joining us today.
As Darren mentioned, we're going to open it up for Q&A. So if you have questions, please send them through the chat icon. The icon is located at the bottom of your screen. And as we wait a couple of moments for questions to come in, as Darren said as well, I want to thank you again for sharing your time with us. Thank you, Angela and Darren, for sharing your expertise with us. As a quick reminder, a recording will be available on our website at bartlettwest.com. So if you had to join us a little bit late, you can check out the first half of that. Or if a colleague wasn't able to attend, direct them to our website and they can watch this after the live event. Checking the chat window here, it looks like we have a question. Do you include traffic studies as part of the desktop due diligence?
I'll go ahead and take that one. That definitely can be included. And again, it's on a case-by-case basis. I would say with the initial or using desktop due diligence, generally doing a full traffic study, doing it and completing it is not within that, but it is identified through the research that we would be doing that the municipality is going to require a traffic study. We certainly as a firm do numerous traffic studies, but again, that would be on a case-by-case basis depending on the project, because traffic studies in and of itself require quite a bit of time and effort to understand the parameters of traffic volumes, intersection, is it signaled, is it not, where's all the traffic coming from, and countless other factors. So understanding more to answer that question specifically on that particular project is what we would need from the client in order to do that. But yes, we could handle traffic studies.
Thank you, Darren. As Darren mentioned earlier, feel free to reach out to either Angela or Darren directly. We have their contact information displayed for you at this time. I'm not seeing any further questions through our chat icon today, so we hope you have a fabulous day, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care, everyone. Thanks again.